The roar of motorcycles sliced through Atlanta's night like a razor, making Max's ears prick up inside the patrol car. Sarah Collins felt the immediate tension in her canine partner and gripped the steering wheel tighter. Through the rearview mirror, she caught the menacing glare of multiplying headlights, a pack of bikers emerging from the shadows of downtown. "Dispatch, this is Collins. We've got about 20 bikers pulling stunts on Heights Boulevard, requesting backup." Sarah kept her voice steady, but her green eyes never stopped tracking the chaos unfolding before her. The screech of tires and thundering engines had transformed the main avenue into an impromptu racing strip. Bodies leaned into powerful machines, defying gravity in increasingly daring stunts. Max barked sharply, his keen instinct detecting something beyond the obvious traffic violations. "I feel it too, partner," Sarah murmured, noticing a pattern in the seemingly chaotic movements. The bikers weren't just showing off, they were escorting something. Confirmation came when a black van cut through a side street, protected by the curtain of motorcycles. Sarah hit the lights, and Max was already in position, muscles coiled tight beneath his tactical vest. The chase was on. The van weaved through traffic, its biker escort splitting into formation with practiced precision. Sarah's years of experience told her this was no random street racing crew. These were professionals using the chaos as cover. "All units, suspect vehicle heading east on Heights, approaching Mason Street." Her radio crackled with responses, but Sarah knew backup was still minutes away. Max's low growl resonated through the cabin. He'd caught a scent. A biker broke from the pack, swinging wide to pull alongside their patrol car. Through the tinted visor, Sarah caught a flash of a grin before the rider dropped back, only to accelerate forward again, engine screaming. "They're trying to box us in, Max." The Belgian Malinois' amber eyes remained fixed ahead, body tense with anticipation. Sarah had seen that look before. Max had identified a threat. The van suddenly braked, sending motorcycles scattering like startled birds. Sarah swerved to avoid the chaos, but she'd played right into their trap. 3 bikes converged, forcing her onto a narrow side street. "Central, we're being corralled onto Cedar Avenue. Suspects are coordinate." A motorcycle slammed into their rear quarter panel, cutting off her transmission. The patrol car fishtailed, tires fighting for grip on the rain-slicked asphalt. Max's bark turned urgent. Through the passenger window, Sarah saw what had triggered his warning, a biker approaching with something in his hand. The streetlights caught the metallic glint of a chain. "Max, down!" Sarah barely got the command out before their window exploded inward. She fought to control the car as Max's protective instincts kicked in. Her partner launched himself toward the threat, jaws snapping at the attacker. The scene devolved into chaos. Metal struck metal, glass shattered, and Max's fierce growl mixed with human shouts. Sarah pulled her weapon, but the bikers had created a perfect storm of confusion and violence. Through the mayhem, she heard Max's yelp of pain. "Max!" Sarah's heart stopped as she saw her partner sprawled on the pavement, surrounded by 3 bikers with chains. His tactical vest was torn, and even in the dim light, she could see blood matting his fur. The choice crystallized in an instant: pursue the van or save her partner. For Sarah Collins, it wasn't really a choice at all. She burst from the car, weapon drawn, but the bikers were already peeling away, their laughter echoing off brick walls. The van's taillights disappeared around a corner, leaving Sarah alone with her injured partner in a street littered with broken glass and spent adrenaline. "Officer down," she reported, her voice cracking as she knelt beside Max. "K9 officer down. Need immediate medical assistance at Cedar and 8th. Her hands moved over his body, assessing the damage, finding wounds that made her stomach turn. Max's amber eyes found hers, still alert despite the pain, still ready to fight. "Stay with me, partner," Sarah whispered, cradling his head. "Just stay with me." In the distance, sirens wailed their approach, but Sarah's world had narrowed to the labored breathing of her closest friend and the growing puddle of blood on the cold Atlanta asphalt. This wasn't just an attack on a police dog. This was personal. And somewhere in the night, the perpetrators were laughing about it. They wouldn't be laughing for long. Sarah Collins made a silent promise as she waited for help to arrive. This was just the beginning. Blue emergency lights painted shadows across the walls of Atlanta Veterinary Trauma Center as Sarah Collins paced the sterile hallway, her boots leaving faint traces of Max's blood with each step. The waiting room clock ticked past 3 a.m., but sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Max's body flying through the air, heard his pain-filled yelp echo off brick walls. The trauma center's K9 unit was the best in Georgia, but that thought provided little comfort as Sarah watched shadows move behind frosted glass. Through the window, she could make out the urgent choreography of the surgical team, their movements sharp and focused. "Officer Collins?" Dr. Martinez emerged from the operating room, her scrubs telling a story Sarah didn't want to read. Blood, Max's blood, stained the front of her gown. "Max is stabilized, but I need to be straight with you. The damage is extensive." Sarah's throat tightened. "How bad?" "The chains caused deep tissue trauma to his left side. There's damage to his ribs, shoulder, and..." The vet hesitated, removing her surgical cap with hands that betrayed exhaustion. "His spine may be compromised. The next 24 hours are critical. The impact fractured 3 ribs, and one of them punctured his lung. We've repaired the immediate damage, but there's significant swelling around his spinal column." Sarah pressed her palm against the cold wall, steadying herself. 5 years of partnership flashed through her mind. Drug busts, missing person searches, countless nights on patrol. She remembered the day she first met Max at the K9 training facility, how he'd ignored all other handlers and sat directly at her feet, those intelligent amber eyes looking straight into her soul. The trainer had laughed, said, "Sometimes the dog chooses you." Her phone buzzed, breaking through the memory. "Lieutenant Richards. Update on Max?" "In surgery," she typed back, then added, "Sir, about the van?" "Stay put, Collins. Team's processing the scene. Take care of your partner." Sarah slipped her phone away, but not before catching a glimpse of her lock screen. A photo of Max on his last birthday, proudly wearing a tactical vest she'd specially ordered. The memory twisted like a knife. That vest hadn't been enough to protect him tonight. "Officer?" A young nurse approached, holding evidence bags. Her name tag read, "Emily. We collected these from Max's fur during prep." Inside, Sarah saw dark paint chips and a small metal fragment. There was also this. She handed over a separate bag containing what looked like a piece of custom motorcycle trim. Her investigator's mind kicked in despite the exhaustion. The paint wasn't from their patrol car. It had to be from one of the bikes. The metal piece looked custom, expensive, the kind of detail work that could identify a specific shop, a specific builder. A commotion erupted from the operating room. Dr. Martinez rushed back in, shouting orders. Sarah's heart stopped as she caught fragments of medical jargon through the swinging doors. "BP dropping, internal bleeding, need more units of blood." "Max!" She stepped forward, but Emily blocked her path, gentle but firm. "Please, Officer Collins, let them work. Dr. Martinez is the best K9 surgeon in the Southeast." Sarah slumped into a chair, the evidence bags clutched in her trembling hands. The metal fragment caught the fluorescent light, and something clicked. She'd seen similar custom work before at a chop shop bust last month. The owner, Marcus Ghost Riley, had walked on a technicality, but not before she'd memorized his smug face and the distinctive style of his custom builds. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The text message contained only an image, Max's torn tactical vest arranged like a trophy on a motorcycle seat. Below it, words that made her blood boil. "Should have stayed in your lane, Officer Collins. Next time we won't just hurt the dog." Sarah's fingers tightened around her phone until her knuckles went white. They wanted her to know this was deliberate. That attack wasn't random chaos, it was targeted revenge. But why? What had she and Max stumbled into during their recent patrols? The operating room doors burst open again. Dr. Martinez's face was grim. "We need to go back in. There's a complication with his lung. The damage is more extensive than we initially thought. Do whatever it takes, Sarah's voice cracked. Please, he's all I've got out there. As the surgical team rushed Max back into operation, Sarah spread the evidence on the chair beside her. The paint chips, the metal fragment, the taunting message, pieces of a puzzle that was starting to take shape. Her radio crackled to life. Collins, we found something at the scene. You're going to want to see this. There's surveillance footage from a nearby business. Shows the whole attack. And something else. Sarah looked toward the operating room, torn between her partner and the investigation. But as she studied the phone's screen again, the threat becoming clearer with each passing moment, she realized finding who did this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about protecting Max from a threat that clearly wasn't finished with them. Through the OR window, monitors beeped their urgent rhythm, counting out the precious seconds of Max's fight for survival. And in the cold hallway of Atlanta's best veterinary hospital, Sarah Collins made a decision that would change everything. She would find every person responsible for this attack, and they would learn why you never, ever hurt a cop's partner. This wasn't just about solving a crime anymore. This was war. Dawn crept over Atlanta like a guilty secret. Sarah stood at the precinct's K9 training yard, coffee growing cold in her hands. 6 hours since Max went into surgery and the morning shift was arriving. Officers averting their eyes, unsure what to say to a handler whose partner lay fighting for his life. Her phone buzzed with an update from Dr. Martinez. Max stable, sedated but responding to treatment. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Alive, for now. She pulled up the surveillance footage Tech had recovered, watching it for the 20th time. The attack played out in grainy black and white. The coordinated moves of the bikers, the precise timing. This wasn't street gang chaos. This was tactical. Thought I'd find you here. Lieutenant Richards approached, his weathered face grave. Got the preliminary on that van. Clean plates, probably stolen, but the paint chips from Max's fur match a specific type of custom work. Only 3 shops in Atlanta use it. Sarah's jaw tightened. Ghost's Custom Cycles is one of them. How'd you know? She handed him the evidence bag with the metal fragment. Because I've seen his work before. Last month's raid on his chop shop, the one where our CI disappeared right before the bust. Richard studied the piece, recognition dawning. The raid that got Ghost released on a technicality. Sir, what if it wasn't just a technicality? Sarah turned to face him fully. What if someone inside the department made sure that case fell apart? The question hung in the morning air like smoke. Richards glanced around the empty yard, then lowered his voice. You remember why you and Max were assigned to Ghost's case in the first place? Sarah's mind flashed back to that briefing 8 months ago. Max at her feet, both of them fresh off a string of successful drug busts. Captain Hayes had called them in personally. Because we had the highest drug seizure rate in the department, Sarah answered, but Richards was shaking his head. Because Hayes insisted on you specifically, said your track record made you perfect for the job. He paused. The same Hayes who suddenly took leave right after Ghost walked. Sarah's coffee cup crumpled in her grip. Are you saying Captain Hayes is... I'm not saying anything. Richards cut her off. But Max getting hurt? That wasn't random. And you need to be careful who you trust while you figure out why. The training yard suddenly felt exposed. Sarah scanned the windows overlooking it, remembering the countless hours she and Max had spent here. Their first day working together played through her mind. Max, the problem dog no other handler could control, surprising everyone with his instant connection to her. There's something else. Richards handed her a file. Ghost's shop wasn't just moving stolen bikes. We found traces of something bigger, but the evidence disappeared before we could process it. The night before the raid, Max marked 3 specific containers. All of them vanished before the warrant was served. Sarah opened the file, and her blood ran cold. Photos showed the containers Max had flagged, and in the background, barely visible, a figure she recognized. Captain Hayes, talking to Ghost himself, 2 days before the raid. Her phone chirped again, another unknown number. The message was simple. Ask your partner what he really found that night. Oh wait, you can't. Shame about that chain slip. Sarah's hands trembled with rage. They weren't just taunting her now. They were admitting premeditation. Max hadn't just stumbled onto their operation tonight. He'd known something 8 months ago, something worth silencing him for. Sir, I need access to the evidence from the ghost raid. All of it. Richards hesitated. That case is sealed, Collins. By direct order from Hayes, I know. Sarah's green eyes hardened. But Max is fighting for his life because of what's in those files. And I'm done playing by rules that protect dirty cops. You go down this road, Richards warned. There's no backing out. These people, they've already shown what they're willing to do. Sarah looked across the training yard, remembering every triumph, every breakthrough she and Max had shared here. Her partner had never hesitated to put his life on the line for her. Now it was her turn. Then they better hope Max doesn't make it, she said quietly, because if he dies, they'll learn what I'm willing to do. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard as Sarah walked away, leaving Richards holding the file. She had 12 hours until Max came out of sedation, 12 hours to start unraveling a conspiracy that reached into the heart of her own department. And somewhere in Atlanta, behind the tinted windows of his custom shop, Ghost was about to learn why canine handlers were considered the most dangerous cops on the force, with or without their dogs. The hunt was on. Ghost's custom cycles loomed in the pre-dawn gloom. Neon signs, dark and rolling shutters sealed tight. Sarah watched from her unmarked car, the Ghost shift's silence broken only by distant sirens. Her service weapon felt heavy against her ribs. Unauthorized surveillance wasn't the only department policy she was breaking tonight. Her burner phone, courtesy of Richards, vibrated. Max, out of second surgery, stable but critical. Dr. M. Sarah touched the phone to her forehead, allowing herself one moment of relief before refocusing on the shop. For 3 nights, she'd watched Ghost's operation, documenting every visitor. The pattern was clear. Late-night deliveries, unmarked vans, and most importantly, regular visits from police cruisers. Movement caught her eye. A patrol car pulling into the alley behind Ghost's shop, lights dark. Sarah raised her camera, focusing on the driver. Her breath caught. Officer James Chen, Internal Affairs. The same man who'd conveniently misplaced key evidence from the Ghost raid. "Got you," she whispered, capturing frames of Chen exchanging envelopes with Ghost's night manager. The pieces were falling into place, but something still didn't add up. Why target Max specifically? Her regular phone chimed. The hospital. Sarah's heart jumped as she answered. "Officer Collins." Dr. Martinez's voice was tight. "You need to come in. Now, there's been a development." "What kind of development?" "Someone tried to access his room. Night staff caught them injecting something into his IV. They got away, but..." The vet paused. "Sarah, they were wearing Atlanta PD gear." The camera slipped from Sarah's numb fingers. They weren't just covering their tracks. They were actively trying to silence Max. But why? What had her partner discovered that was worth killing for? A sharp tap on her window shattered her thoughts. Ghost himself stood there, chrome-plated. 45 pointed at her head, his signature skull bandana grinning in the darkness. "Inside, Officer Collins," he said smoothly. "Captain Hayes wants a word." Sarah's mind raced. Hayes was here? The pieces suddenly aligned. The raid, the missing evidence, Max's attack. It was bigger than a dirty cop or smuggling operation. "Now, Collins, unless you want another call about your dog's condition." Sarah stepped out slowly, hands raised. Ghost marched her toward the shop's side door, but his swagger told her everything she needed to know. He was enjoying this too much, too confident. That would be his mistake. Inside, the shop was a maze of partially stripped bikes and engine parts. Hayes stood by a workbench, still wearing his captain's uniform. The sight made Sarah's stomach turn. "You know," Hayes said conversationally, "Max was always too good at his job. Most canines, you can distract them, confuse the scent. But him," he shook his head. "He knew exactly what was in those containers." "What was in them, sir?" Sarah kept her voice steady, cataloguing exits, weapons within reach. Must have been important to warrant killing a police dog. Hayes laughed. Killing? Oh no, Officer Collins. Tonight was about sending a message. See, we've got a major shipment coming in. Can't have you and your wonder dog sniffing around. The department will investigate Max's attack. The department? Ghost snorted. Half your precinct is on our payroll. Why do you think that evidence disappeared? Why your backup was conveniently delayed tonight? Sarah's hand inched toward her backup piece, strapped to her ankle. You're running drugs through the department itself. Better? Hayes smiled. We are the department, at least the parts that matter. And after tonight, you'll understand exactly how this works. Either play along, he nodded to Ghost, who raised his weapon, or join your partner in retirement. The overhead lights suddenly flared on. Through the windows, Sarah caught the flash of tactical gear. A familiar voice boomed through a megaphone. Atlanta PD, building surrounded. Captain Hayes, Ghost, you're both under arrest. Richards. He'd been tracking her burner phone. What happened next was chaos. Ghost fired, Sarah dove, and the world exploded in breaking glass and shouted commands. She rolled behind a workbench, drawing her weapon as SWAT breached from multiple entries. In the confusion, she spotted Hayes, slipping toward a back exit. Not this time. Sarah pursued, fury driving her forward. He'd hurt Max, corrupted everything she'd sworn to protect. They crashed into the alley. Hayes surprisingly spry for his age. But Sarah had 5 years of K9 training. She'd chased faster suspects. Her tackle brought them both down hard on the asphalt. You really don't understand what you're interrupting. Hayes spat as she cuffed him. Sarah turned him roughly. I understand enough. You hurt my partner. Richards appeared in the alley, weapon trained. Sarah, we got them, all of them, including Chen and the night shift crew. Her phone buzzed, the hospital again. This time when she answered, Dr. Martinez was crying. He's awake, the vet said. Sarah, Max is awake, and he's trying to stand. Sarah felt tears stream down her face as she watched Hayes being led away. In the distance, dawn was breaking over Atlanta, bringing light to shadows that had festered too long in darkness. Go, Richard said softly. Your partner needs you. We'll handle the cleanup. Sarah was already running to her car. Behind her, Ghost's custom cycles swarmed with tactical teams, its secrets finally exposed to the light. But none of that mattered now. Her partner was waiting. The Atlanta Police Department Internal Affairs Office buzzed with nervous energy. Sarah sat rigidly in the interview room, her freshly pressed uniform a stark contrast to the exhaustion etched on her face. 48 hours since the raid on Ghost's shop, and the department was imploding. 17 officers arrested, 3 precincts under investigation, and Captain Hayes singing like a bird in federal custody. Each new revelation felt like another crack in the foundation she'd sworn to protect. Officer Collins, Assistant District Attorney Marcus Wade, leaned forward, his tie loose around his neck, dark circles under his eyes matching hers. Walk me through it one more time. You're saying this goes beyond Ghost's operation. Sarah placed a USB drive on the table, the small device carrying enough evidence to shatter careers and reshape the department. These surveillance photos show Hayes meeting with someone at the port, someone who isn't in custody yet, someone who thinks they're still untouchable. The puppet master, Wade murmured, reaching for the drive. Maxwell Richardson, Sarah corrected, her voice hard. CEO of Atlantic Shipping, the containers Max flagged, they were his. Hayes and Ghost were just middle management, 2 bits of gristle in a much bigger machine. Her phone vibrated. The veterinary hospital's daily update. A video showed Max, wobbling but determined, taking his first steps since the surgery. Dr. Martinez's voice narrated his progress. Spine's healing well. The swelling's down significantly. He's fighting hard, Sarah, just like his partner. The sight of Max standing, despite everything, made her throat tight. Sarah pocketed the phone, refocusing on Wade. Richardson's ships docked tonight. Same cargo, same cover story. But this time we have Hayes's confession. We have the money trails. We have everything. It's not enough. Wade shook his head, running fingers through his thinning hair. Richardson's lawyers will bury this in motions. They'll claim Hayes is lying to save himself. We need... The door burst open. Lieutenant Richards rushed in, face pale, hand on his weapon. Sarah, the hospital just called. Someone breached security. They're moving Max now, but she was already running, gun drawn. Richardson was tying up loose ends, just like she'd warned them he would. Just like no one had wanted to believe. The hospital parking lot was chaos when Sarah arrived, her tires screeching on wet asphalt. Police cars surrounded the K9 unit entrance, officers with weapons drawn. Red and blue lights painted the scene in alternating shadows of threat and rescue. Dr. Martinez met her at the door, shaking. 4 men, she reported, clutching her tablet like a shield. Professional, military stance. They knew exactly where to go, which security protocols to bypass. They had access codes, Sarah, current ones. A crash echoed from inside, followed by the unmistakable sound of Max's warning growl. Sarah charged past the doctor, heart pounding against her ribs. The K9 recovery ward was at the end of the hall, and she could hear struggling the sound of medical equipment being overturned. She rounded the corner to find 2 men in tactical gear trying to restrain Max. Despite his injuries, her partner was living up to his reputation as the unit's top dog. His teeth were locked onto one attacker's arm, while the other fumbled with a syringe filled with clear liquid. Max's bandages were spotted with fresh blood, but his eyes burned with protective fury. "Police! Freeze!" The men spun, reaching for weapons concealed under their fake orderly uniforms. But Max, even injured, was faster. He launched himself at the one with the syringe, sending them both crashing into medical equipment. Sarah engaged the other, their close-quarter struggle knocking over monitors and IV stands. She felt his fist graze her jaw, tasted blood, but responded with years of training. Her knee found his solar plexus, and his grunt of pain was deeply satisfying. Through the chaos, she caught movement in the hallway, 2 more attackers approaching, weapons drawn. But before they could enter, a familiar bark echoed through the corridor. Lieutenant Richards's K9, Rex, charged in with a tactical team behind him. The reinforcement Sarah had called for the moment she'd left internal affairs. The fight was over in seconds. As officers secured the suspects, Sarah rushed to Max, who stood trembling but proud, blood seeping through his bandages. His sides heaved with effort, but his tail still wagged at her approach. "Easy, partner," she whispered, supporting his weight as his legs began to shake. "I got you. You did good." So good. She felt his heart racing against her palm, gradually slowing as he recognized the danger had passed. One of the attackers laughed through bloodied teeth, spitting red onto the pristine hospital floor. "Doesn't matter. Richardson's shipment is already moving. You can't stop." "Actually," Richard stepped in, grinning as he holstered his weapon. "We can. Your boss just walked into an FBI sting at the port. Turns out Hayes kept detailed records, including offshore accounts, shipping manifests, everything. Never trust a dirty cop to stay loyal, especially one facing federal time." Sarah hugged Max gently, feeling his rapid heartbeat slow as Dr. Martinez rushed to check his wounds. They'd done it. The conspiracy was crumbling, from street level all the way to the executive suites. "Sarah?" Richards touched her shoulder, his expression softening. "There's something else. The review board. They're reinstating you both. With commendations, full duty once Max completes rehab." Max's tail wagged weakly as Sarah buried her face in his fur, careful to avoid his injuries. 5 years of partnership, countless operations, and now this, their toughest fight yet. But they'd faced it like they faced everything, together, without hesitation, without surrender. Outside, Atlanta's night was alive with sirens as the last pieces of Richardson's empire fell. But in a quiet hospital room, a handler and her K9 held onto each other, their bond stronger than any chain, more powerful than any conspiracy. They were back, and Atlanta's underworld would never be the same. 3 months felt like an eternity in the K9 training yard. Sarah watched as Max cleared the obstacle course, his movements fluid and powerful, no trace of the injuries that had nearly taken him from her. Above them, Atlanta's autumn sky burned blue and clear, a perfect day for what was coming next. A small crowd had gathered to witness their return. Fellow officers, K9 handlers, and even the chief of police himself. "Time!" Dr. Martinez called out, clicking her stopwatch. The vet smiled, checking off the final box on her certification form. Full recovery. Actually, better than that. He's beating his old records by 3 seconds. Max trotted to Sarah's side, head held high, tail wagging with pride. His new tactical vest gleamed in the morning sun, the reinforced material a testament to lessons learned the hard way. The scars beneath his fur told one story, but his eager stance told another. He was ready. The custom-designed vest was now standard issue for all K9 units in Atlanta, part of the reforms their case had initiated. "Officer Collins," Lieutenant Richards approached, carrying a ceremonial box. Behind him stood the new Internal Affairs Director, Catherine Chen, who had helped clean house after the Richardson scandal. "Think it's time we made this official again." Sarah knelt beside Max, removing his temporary training tags. The box contained his official K9 unit badge and collar insignia, polished to a mirror shine. As she attached them, her mind flashed back to that night 3 months ago. The chains, the blood, the fear. But those memories were losing their power, replaced by the triumph of their recovery and return. "The department owes you both more than we can ever repay," Chief Thompson said, stepping forward. "Thanks to you and Max, we've completely restructured our oversight protocols. The Richardson case didn't just clean up Atlanta, it's becoming a model for K9 units nationwide." Sarah felt a surge of pride as she stood, squeezing Max's favorite blue training toy. The same one they'd used in their first training session, back when he was just the problem dog no one else could handle. Now, he was a legend in the department, the K9 who helped bring down Atlanta's biggest police corruption scandal and inspired a wave of reforms across the country. The takedown of Maxwell Richardson had shaken the city to its core. 43 arrests, including 12 police officers and 3 Port Authority officials. The evidence trail Max had uncovered led to shipping operations in 3 states. The FBI had called it the biggest bust in Georgia history. Richardson himself had received a life sentence, and Captain Hayes' testimony had ensured none of their co-conspirators would see freedom for decades. But for Sarah, the real victory was simpler. Max, alive and whole beside her, ready to return to the job they both loved. "Central, this is K9-1, she keyed her radio. "Officer Collins and Max reporting for duty." The response came immediately, dispatch unable to hide their enthusiasm. "Welcome back, K9-1. The streets haven't been the same without you." Through the crowd, Sarah spotted Ghost's former lieutenant, now a key witness in the ongoing federal investigation. He'd turned state's evidence after seeing Max's determination that night at the hospital. "Your dog," he'd told the prosecutors, "showed more loyalty than any human I've ever known. Made me realize I was on the wrong side." "Ready to get back to work, partner?" Sarah asked, looking down at Max. His amber eyes met hers with absolute trust and excitement. Max's bark echoed across the training yard, drawing applause from the gathered crowd. Dr. Martinez wiped away tears as she signed the final reinstatement papers. Even the usually stoic Richards looked emotional. They walked to their patrol car, a new K9 unit specially modified with enhanced safety features, now standard across the department. Max jumped into his compartment without hesitation, alert and ready. No fear, no hesitation. Just pure joy at being back where he belonged. Sarah started the engine, checking her partner in the rearview mirror. The scars would always be there, reminders of how close they'd come to losing everything. But scars meant survival, meant getting back up, no matter how hard they tried to keep you down. And now those scars were badges of honor, symbols of a partnership that had changed their city for the better. "K9-1 responding," she radioed, pulling out of the lot. "Show us en route." As they drove through Atlanta's streets, Sarah saw their impact everywhere. New K-9 training facilities under construction, improved security protocols at the port, and most importantly, a restored faith in the department they served. Max's attack had exposed the rot, but his recovery had inspired real change. At a red light, she reached back to scratch Max's favorite spot behind his ears. He leaned into her touch, their partnership stronger than ever. They'd faced down corrupt cops, criminal empires, and death itself. Whatever this new call brought, they'd face it the same way. Together, stronger for everything they'd overcome. The light turned green. Sarah hit the sirens, and Max stood in his compartment ready for action. Ahead of them, Atlanta stretched out like a maze of possibilities. But they weren't just back on patrol. They were back on purpose. Their bond an example of what real partnership meant. Because sometimes it takes a special kind of courage to bring light to the darkest corners of a city. Sometimes it takes a handler with unwavering loyalty and a dog with a heart brave enough to match it. And sometimes it takes two partners willing to risk everything to protect what's right. Let's go to work, partner. Max's confident bark said everything else. They were back, better than ever, and Atlanta was safer for it.